All right. Can you hear me, everyone?
Yep.
Okay. And can you see my presentation too?
Yep.
Okay. So this year I will try something different. I think the current times calls for creative ways to communicate our science for many reasons. Number one, we're competing against many distractions. And second, there's also the rise of anti-science rhetoric. We know that we cannot change a person's opinion by just delivering facts. It should appeal to like the emotions and also the past experiences. So this stems from my exploration of storytelling and science communication. I will use Philippine folklore and myth as a framework to describe our research. So this presentation is the retelling of a four-tailed phytoplankton virus infection through the parasitic Aswang narrative. So myth, according to a lot of scholars, is a vehicle of profound knowledge, and also myth is a tool for science communication. It's in the popular culture and also within the public imagination, so it's easy to access and it's easy to draw analogy from. In this presentation, I will use Aswang as a metaphor for viruses. Aswang is a creature of lower mythology. It's an umbrella term for Philippine mythical shape-shifting evil beings, somewhat analogous to the Western concept of the vampire, werewolves, witch, and ghouls. The Aswang concept also has reached the global audience, primarily because Filipinos are diasporic. They migrated to different parts of the world. With them is the culture. So here I'll be showing some short clips of Aswang in US and Philippine TV series and movies compiled by Jordan Clark. You will hear his narration too.
Wonderful place to grow up. In the Philippines. Mindoro. Panay. Really fascinating. And this one? This is the Aswang. Good God.
I started watching any movie I could get my hands on relating to Philippine folklore and was again introduced to the Aswang. This creature seemed able to do anything. It could transform into animals,
So using the Aswang narrative, I will try to convey our research into three parts. The first part is the infection, altering host internals. Part two is the possessed, hijacking transcriptional landscape. And part three is the offspring, implications, and passing over. One of the most famous aswang is the manananggal, or the viscera sucker. In other parts of Southeast Asia, it is called peningal in Malaysia. In Cambodia and Laos, it's krasyu. The defining feature of a manananggal, it is bat-like wings and also remarkably long tongue. And also its ability to split itself in half. And story tells us that you cannot kill a manananggal without killing the lower half. And again, as the name implies, the manananggal or the visceral sucker alters the internal organ of its prey. And it attacks the unsuspecting host during the night. So in our story, the unsuspecting host is a phytoplankton, a four-tailed phytoplankton called Tetraselmis. And we followed its infection progression guided by our measurement of extracellular viruses, as shown in this graph. So before infection, this is 1 hour before infection, we see a lot of common cellular structure, such as nucleus, vacuoles, chloroplast, and pyronoid, which is a organelle which is used for storage of starch. And at 4 hours post-infection, we see no apparent change in the cellular structure of the cell. However, by 8 hours, we see the first appearance of the mature viruses. And at 16 hours, there's initial slight increase in extracellular viruses, and we see the cell almost unrecognizable as the uninfected one, and there's a lot of viruses inside. And at 20 hours, we see the lysis of the cell. Through this method, we're able to also see two putative stages of virus assembly. The first one we called assembly aggregates, and the second one we called virus factory. In assembly aggregates, the virus tried to create a pseudospherical core and then further package into sort of isohedral-like particle. And then for the virus factory, we hypothesize that the virus gets its DNA from the virus factory. And the virus factory is actually ubiquitous across different types of viruses. Here I'm showing you the virus factory of Acanthamoeba virus. And also, SARS coronavirus also has a specific virus factory. In technical terms, it's called replication transcriptional complex. And viruses create this spatially distinct, sometimes membrane-bound organelles to protect itself. It shields the virus from host nucleases and antiviral defenses. It sort of concentrates replication machineries. On to the second part. One of the special abilities of an aswang is its supernatural powers. An example is a mambabarang, or the witch, shown here. One of the features of a mambabarang, it can conjure insect out of a human flesh. And of course, as a witch or a wizard, it can control its prey. So in our project, we're trying to understand how the virus controls its host. What are the molecular mechanisms that the virus manipulates the host? And I've listed some here. For example, small RNA regulation, viral nucleases, transcription initiation and termination, and alternative splicing. In the interest of time, I will be able to discuss some of these ways in manipulating the host. The first one is the viral nucleases. So virus express nucleases to degrade the RNA of the host. And interestingly, upon addition of the virus, we can see that the RNA of the host is degraded. Again, one of the supernatural powers of the virus, so to speak, is it can express its genes at will. So here, I'm showing you a heat map of genes of Acanthamoeba virus. Those genes that are expressed at an early stage have a similar promoter region, and those that are expressed at a later stage have a similar promoter region as well. Another power of the virus is that it contains a hairpin loop at the end of the transcript, so it can terminate the transcription similar to the prokaryotes. So in summary, sequencing and analysis, which is still ongoing, will allow us to interrogate viral hijacking of host transcriptional landscape. On to the last part, which is implication and passing over. I will try to wrap up what we've discussed and learned. But first, Aswang story tells that they can transfer their essence to another Aswang by transferring a black cheek. They do this to heal another Aswang, and also they do this for an Aswang to be fully developed. Here I will show you a short clip depicting the transfer.
Anak na, upang ako'y sumakabilang buhay. Tanggapin mo ang maitim na sisiw na ito at kamtin ang liwanag ng kadiliman.
So there. So what I hope you gain from this presentation is, again, these two concepts. Number one, which is the infection. The virus alters the internals, the organelles, and the cellular structure of the cell. It creates its own subcellular structure to protect itself. And second one, the virus has mechanism in ways to manipulate the host. That's the possessed chapter of the presentation. And of course, we study this virus host interaction at the molecular scale because it also affects ocean scale processes. The boom and bust, the birth and death of phytoplankton is affected by virus infection. And so before I end this presentation, I want to talk a little bit about the utility of myth in science communication. We can further theorize science myth retelling as a queer project because of two reasons. Number one, it's non-conforming. It's antithesis to like structured, very masculine, rigid delivery of facts. And it's also political. So it's highlight cultural texts and oral traditions of the global south and developing world. And also I'll try to question the privileging of Western science versus indigenous knowledge systems. And I try to like show that there's fluidity between Western and the myth and folklore. Again, by retelling, I hope I can by get everyone acquainted with other cultures, we can reimagine a more inclusive scientific practice in community. However, although aswang is a good metaphor for virus, it also has a limit. When we try to personify virus, it comes with different problematic connotations. Again, viruses are not necessarily evil. In fact, there are some studies that shows viruses are beneficial too. And also, in the lens of evolution, virus has no particular goals or purpose. It can survive. The goal is to survive. But again, in less of the evolution, they're just tinkering and it's all trial and error. So lastly, the advantages of using myth and folklore in science communication, because essentially science communication is storytelling, and myth and folklore are essentially stories passed down from one generation to another. And also the advantage of myth is the suspension of disbelief. So if we like hear or see stories like in movies, even if it's fiction, we will hold judgment and try to like listen and comprehend it more closely. And so I think I don't have much time left. This is not a new idea. I'm showing you a Filipino comic author was able to successfully weave Filipino myth and science to explain the birth of the Philippine archipelago, which is basically the collision of the Philippine sea plate and the Eurasian plate. And this is my acknowledgement slide. And with that, I can take questions if there's any.
Great job. Thank you, Ari. That was an amazing way to communicate your science. And Ganamika just has a comment congratulating you. And if anyone wants to post questions in the chat, we have maybe 1 minute.